This is the Artemis podcast. We're your co-hosts, Annita
and Paige. There's no one definition of a sportswoman,
but we're here to explore the stories of the million ways to be one
and how sportswomen are leading the conservation movement. The Artemis podcast is back. I'm Paige McMahon, and today you're going to meet our new Artemis program manager, Annita Lucchesi. Many thanks to Artemis Ambassador Megan Plete Postol, who joined me for the discussion. We heard about Annita's background, her connection to the land, her love of animals, and why she's excited to take the helm at Artemis. When we spoke to her, Annita had just gotten back from deer camp at the Artemis All-Women's Hunt Lease in Tennessee. I hope you enjoyed the conversation as much as we did.
Hi, everyone. My name is Annita Lucchesi, and my name in my tribal language is Heto'Vetoke, which means evening star woman. I'm a Northern Cheyenne descendant, and I spend my time between my tribal homelands in Southeast Montana and the area where I grew up in rural Northern California, which is where I am now on the Klamath and Trinity Rivers. Super excited to be here for steelhead season. And yeah, I'm the new program manager at Artemis. A little bit more about myself. I'm a lifelong angler and a brand new hunter, and I'm sure we can get into it later in the conversation, but my background is in gender equity work and also Indigenous earth sciences. So I've had kind of two parallel careers, both of them community centered and very nerdy, and excited to share more about that today.
Would you like to kind of go more into who you are as an Indigenous sportswoman?
I am very fortunate in that I grew up in a family that really valued time outdoors. My mom and my stepdad also love to fish. My mom's side is also from Louisiana, and my family down there loves to fish and did it daily. So fishing has been a big part of my life since day one. And my dad is also an outdoorsman in different ways. And I have fond memories of being, small with my brother, and my dad would like take us up into the hills and say, okay, you each have a dog and a granola bar. Find your way home before it's dark and don't eat something poisonous. And so that was kind of my introduction to being out in the woods, which is a really neat way to grow up. Cool. I did not grow up in my tribal community. I reconnected as an adult, which has been both a beautiful and challenging experience. But I think a big part of that reconnection to my culture and to my tribal community has been land-based activities, whether that's fishing in some of the ponds on our reservation, gathering traditional plant medicines and learning about those. There's a lot of different ways that we connect to the land on a day-to-day basis. And for me, a big part has been horses. So now I grew up with animals, and now that I'm a little more settled in my adult years, and I have 3 horses, and 2 of them are Mustangs from a wild herd on my reservation. And it's been a really neat way to connect to culture and connect to my homeland by building relationships with them. So that's a little bit about me and my outdoors world. I did mention I'm a new hunter too. I'm really thankful to the Artemis program because I've always wanted to learn and never really had an entry point or someone to teach me. And now I get to learn from the amazing ladies in Artemis. So going to deer camp on our hunt lease was my first official experience hunting. And I cannot think of a better way to get introduced. Just to be surrounded by so many capable can-do women who are so encouraging, so supportive. It was a really neat way to jump into that world too.
While we're on this thread, to just dig into that a little bit more. So tell me a little bit about what went through your mind when you're walking into this camp and you're a new hunter.
I mean, there's definitely some nervous jitters with it because it's a whole new world and a new experience. And I think, this is something Paige and I have talked about before. There's such a culture of perfectionism in hunting and fishing. Nobody ever posts the videos of when they, fall into the river or trip over themselves or something and so it makes beginners feel like you have to get it right on the first try. But what I really appreciated about the Artemis Deer Camp is it absolutely did not have that vibe. There was no question that was too embarrassing to ask. There was um, no kind of pressure to be perfect. Everyone was there genuinely wanting to see each and every woman there succeed and grow and learn. And success, I think, wasn't necessarily measured by harvesting an animal. It was, are you having a good time? Are you learning? Are you, putting in the work? Are you supporting each other? And that was a really cool way to learn.
It's beautiful. That's pretty much like what Artemis is all about, right?
Yeah.
Um, Annita, can you tell us a little bit about your academic and your professional journey and how they might shape you as a sportswoman?
Sure. So as I kind of mentioned, I've had kind of two parallel careers. One of them in Indigenous earth sciences. My degrees are in geography. And I studied cartography as an undergrad and have worked as a freelance cartographer, so a map maker, for over 15 years, which feels crazy to say. I don't feel that old, but I am. Um, and I really love maps because there's such a cool confluence of art and data. Um, and I think such a powerful storytelling tool. That's how I really got into them. And my specialty in that area has always been Indigenous data sovereignty. So the rights that Indigenous people have to govern information, stories, data about ourselves, our lands, our cultures, and how we can use maps to better implement tribal sovereignty. So, a lot of it has been around mapping cultural and historic sites, mapping environmental degradation, and then a lot of it has been mapping human rights abuses and violence. Um, Kind of tandem to that, I built a career as an anti violence advocate in tribal communities. It wasn't necessarily intentional, like, it wasn't what I set out to do, but I think something special about growing up or being part of tribal communities, and I think this is true for like rural communities in general. If you see something that needs to get done, you just go do it. Like, you don't wait for someone to ask you to get it done or to tell you how to do it. You just go do it. And that's kind of how I fell into the anti-violence work. I'm a survivor of multiple forms of violence myself and have been very public about my story and the things that I've been through. And I kept hearing people say, well, we don't know how many missing and murdered Native women there are. There's this crisis, and we know that there's thousands, but we don't know how many. We don't know their names. And I thought, well, we can sit down and figure it out. And I was pretty naive in thinking that project would have a start and an end. But out of that grew building my own nonprofit around addressing missing and murdered Indigenous people as an issue, and all of its kind of contributing factors. Um, and a big part of that was uplifting Indigenous women as the experts on our own bodies, on our own experiences of violence, and also on imagining what safety or sovereignty might look like. So I think those two careers really dovetail nicely into this new position at Artemis, because I have that experience of doing land-based work, and doing work that's focused on protecting and honoring the land in a good way, while also having a very long career working with women from all walks of life and supporting them in their journeys to heal and grow and build themselves, and supporting women's leadership development. So I was really excited to get this opportunity because I think it's a really neat way to kind of braid those two experiences together.
Absolutely. And I think everyone that has interacted with you can see how perfect of a fit it is for the program moving forward. But why are you so excited to continue this work as the head of Artemis as a program manager?
I mean, Artemis is just an incredible program. The Women's Hunt Lease alone is such a neat and incredible idea. And really blew me away when I heard about it. But then thinking about even the broader work that Artemis does is just, I think, so promising. I think women do belong at the helm of the conservation movement, and I'm really excited to be part of making that happen. And personally, I really after spending so many years addressing violence in various forms, whether that was mapping mass grave sites and mapping massacre sites, historic, but also contemporary. I was mapping mass grave sites and massacres in Central America that, happened during our lifetimes. Going from that to addressing violence in my tribal community in a very hands-on way. I mean, I was reviewing autopsies of children that went to school with my nieces. Um, After going through those experiences for so long, I was really craving a role that was forward looking and hopeful and exciting and constructive, something that put me out on the land and put me outdoors. And something that surrounded me by people who also wanted to be out on the land and outdoors and were really, I think that's the best way to invest in your mental health. And so I was thinking, how can I be around healthy people that want to be outside and are taking care of themselves? And so this job just felt absolutely perfect for that reason. And it's been such an awesome experience so far. I'm still just a few months in. But what a blessing to get to this is my job. I had to fly to Tennessee and learn to go deer hunting for my job.
What does it mean to you to now be leading this program as an Indigenous woman as well?
It means a lot to me. I think, when I think about what it means to be Indigenous, it's not a right, it's a responsibility. Being Indigenous is being part of a network of accountability, and especially being an Indigenous woman. I come from a tribe that our women are really strong. It was a Cheyenne woman that killed Custer. And she has an incredible story that if we had more time, I would go into. But she took his own sword and cut him in half with it, and kept it as a prize until she died. And wore it publicly. And so that's why if you go to like powwows today, you'll see women wearing traditional dresses and they'll have like a silver drop of metal hanging down from their waist to the floor. It's to represent that sword. So that's the kind of women that we have in our tribe. And she certainly wasn't she was incredible, but she wasn't uncommon in that sense. We had a lot of women who were incredible in all sorts of ways. And fought really fiercely to protect our homelands, our ways of life, our children, and our people. And so I take that to heart, no matter what career I'm in. And to be in this role, we think of wildlife as non-human relatives. They're part of our family. And so this is just a different way of taking care of my relatives. I was taking care of survivors and victims for so long. Now I'm taking care of our non-human survivors and victims and trying to give them, safety and sovereignty to live their lives how they're meant to. So that's kind of how I connect our cultural beliefs to NWF and the work that it does. But also I think it's really special to have an Indigenous woman leading Artemis specifically, because we are of this land, we are of this continent, we are matriarchs, we are leaders, and to be able to represent that in this role and to be part of empowering women of all communities and all backgrounds is, I think, part of like my responsibility as an Indigenous woman and as an Indigenous land protector, is that I get to work with other women who are also carrying that shared mindset of being connected to the land and protecting it.
I love that. Our women are ambassadors are serving as, local leaders all throughout where they are based. Why do you think it's important to have women in powerful leadership positions in conservation?
Women get stuff done. Paige and I were talking about this the other night because she was asking me about deer camp and was asking well, how did it feel to be around all of these, women who are so strong and about it? And I told her, it feels great, of course. But it's a familiar experience to me because being in tribal communities, every woman's like that. Every woman, I've seen Native women do stuff that like men wouldn't dream about doing. In terms of like wrangling angry, ornery horses, or, you know, chopping a bunch of firewood. Like my 13-year-old niece, in our traditional way, when we hold a funeral, we burn a fire for 4 days, 4 nights. And normally it's men who chop wood. But my niece was like, and 13 and petite, and she cut all the firewood for it. Like that's just kind of, we're tough by nature, but I also think women in general are tough by nature, and especially outdoors women. Um, so it's been cool to witness that among the ambassadors and the participants in our events. And I think, you know, women, like I look at my tribal community for inspiration in this way, that like our language department, our tribal college, our tribal clinic, our tribal council, our so like so much of our education, you know, like our schools and things like that, it's mostly staffed and run by women.
Wow.
And it's, you know, I would love to see that work be collaborative across all genders, but also it's really neat to see that like women step up when no one else does. Women step up and get it done. And I think we've all seen that in our communities in various ways. And that's, I think, the main reason why the conservation movement really needs women's leadership is we are committed, we are dedicated, we do get stuff done, and we think about the bigger picture differently. I think, you know, I don't want to make sweeping generalizations about all women are this way or all men are that way, because there's so much diversity. But I do think that women, because we carry so much in our families and our communities, that it comes natural to us to think intergenerationally, and to think long term. And those are values that I think are deeply needed in the conservation movement.
I think that makes a lot of sense. And I think a lot of people in the outdoors world resonate with that, because it is, you know, women are doing it and we want to, you know, our voices heard and everything. So what is your vision for the future of Artemis?
Well, I'm super excited. We're in the process of reviewing applications for new ambassadors. And Paige can attest, we have some really awesome applicants. It's going to be some hard decisions. And I'm excited. I think we have a really diverse array of voices in those applicants, diverse array of lived experiences, skills when it comes to hunting and angling. And so I'm really eager to see Artemis kind of grow in those ways. And Paige, feel free to add to this too. She and I have had conversations about kind of what does Artemis mean? What is our role in the greater ecosystem of organizations that are making the outdoors more accessible to women or uplifting women in conservation? And I think for us, it's that there's a million and one ways to be a sportswoman. There's no one size fits all. There's no, box that we have to fill. We don't have to live in comparison to men or even in comparison to each other. And that Artemis can provide that space where each sportswoman is empowered to be her full authentic self as a sportswoman. And so I'm really excited for us to kind of lean into that energy some more.
I love that. I know that we're ticking down and we're getting close to out of time, but before we wrap it up, Annita, is there anything that we haven't thought to ask you that you'd like our listeners to know?
I will say one thing that I think makes women accessing hunting and angling unique is that so many of us are survivors. I know it's a hard thing to talk about, but I do like to talk about it because I think it's important to kind of break that stigma and help people come forward. But the reality is that there are more women than we know, and women are much more disproportionately victimized. And I mean, this is especially true in tribal communities. The kind of statistic that gets thrown around a lot is that 1 in 3 Native women will be raped in their lifetime. But I have an auntie who says, well, I want to go talk to the other two because we know the rate is higher. And I can say, as someone who was engaged in this work as an advocate and a researcher for the last almost 10 years, I would say the rate is more close to like 90%. To be honest, I don't know that I know any Native woman that hasn't been assaulted in some way. And so, like, returning to fishing, returning to time with the horses, learning plant medicines and going out foraging for those, like, those are the things that were grounding and healing for me when I needed it most as a survivor, and really gave me an opportunity to develop my confidence and my sense of identity beyond what had happened to me. Um, Gave me an outlet for my mental health. And really just, like in our cultures, in Native cultures, and I don't want to speak for everybody, but just kind of in my experience, they teach us that when there's something we can't carry, the land will carry it for you. And one story I'll mention really quickly is I was living in Canada at the time, in Alberta, and there was an elder who was attending an event on gender violence and shared that, her sister had been murdered several years prior, and was talking about her healing journey. And she said, anytime you feel like you're carrying grief or hurt or any kind of emotions that you just can't or don't want to carry anymore, go outside and give it to the wind, and the wind will take it away. And then her kind of joke was, good thing we live on the plains because it's always windy in Alberta. So there's always a chance to heal every day, as long as you step outside. And so I think that's something that I've kind of taken with me. Her name was Corolla Calfrobe. And I'm really thankful to Corolla for that. She's now passed on a few years ago, but that story still really resonates with me. And I think that's another reason why hunting and angling is so important to be accessible for women, because it does build your confidence. It does connect you to a broader community of women that can lift you up. It does, help. Like, sitting in the deer blind was the most peaceful experience I've had in a long time. And having access to that, I think, benefits that woman, her family, her community, the conservation movement, the sporting world. Like, there's just so many benefits for everyone. And so that's another reason I'm excited to be in this role and be part of making the outdoors more accessible to women. And Paige, maybe you could share a little bit about the event you're planning, because I'm really excited about it. And I think it's a model others should replicate.
Yeah. So kind of, Annita obviously has this wonderful point of view of how healing the outdoors is, and everyone that spends time in the outdoors, understands that. And sharing that ability with our most vulnerable populations is just something that I think we should be exploring further. So I am working with one of my connections around here, and we're trying to get a fishing event pulled together for survivors of domestic violence. We're going to work with one of the shelters that's in the area and try to, give those women that are going through a tough time a community and confidence and just peace in the outdoors. I mean, every single person that spends time outside knows that when you go too long without being outside, you feel it. Like, you feel everything, you know that you need to get outside. And so to share that ability to, like, reset yourself and to start fresh, whether that's start fresh for the minute, for the hour, for the day, like, it looks different for everyone. But I think that is a huge thing that we could really help with. So yeah, I'm very excited to see how it turns out.
Me too.
That's beautiful. And I love that idea. And I think that's like one of the biggest things at Artemis and some of the other women's programming that we try to get out there the message that like it's so empowering to be able to do things outside, but be able to do them either with women or to have the skills to do them yourself. So I love that, Paige, that you're doing an event like that. And I love, Annita, that you're brave and you can tell your story, because so many of us, we've lived these things, we've lived this narrative, and yet, you know, we don't talk about it. So thank you to you for actually being able to talk about it and making space for other women to feel comfortable enough to share.
Yeah, I mean, I'll just add, I almost started crying at deer camp because I just kept thinking like, man, I used to be homeless and now I'm here in this like beautiful woods in Tennessee watching the sunrise, getting to go hunt with these women who just want to see me succeed. And like how lucky, how blessed am I that I got to go from that, because I'm a trafficking survivor. So I was on the streets and experienced all sorts of violence during that period of my life. And so having an opportunity to go from that to this is just incredible. And so healing, so empowering. I'm really, it feels almost selfish being in this job because I enjoy it so much. And it's been so good for me just on a personal level.
In conversations Annita and I have had, it's really exciting to see how Annita has been able to step into this role, and we really want to bring so many along in this this journey forward. And I think it's going to look a little bit different than it has in the past of Artemis, and but I think it's going to help bring others into the space, and then that will help trickle in so many different factors. Conservation will get more funding and more support, and we'll have women stepping up more readily because we have more women, supporting each other. So I really think it's going to be a really special time. I'm really excited to have Annita on board.
Well, and I will say one area of growth for us at Artemis, and Paige and I are still working on the vision of what this looks like, is kind of our two main values that we want to instill is like, number one, building community amongst women who are interested in being outdoors. And number two, really walking our talk and being a role model in terms of setting a standard for what equity-centered conservation work looks like. And of course, gender equity is our primary focus, being a women serving program. But also, I think it goes far beyond that to include all sorts of different lived experiences and addressing all sorts of different inequities. Again, that connects back to our value of like, there's 1,000,001 different ways to be a sportswoman. Everyone has different access points and entry points, different passions and interests, different physical abilities. And there's room for all of that. And really building like, Paige and I were joking last night, like, we only want girls around. And how do we screen for that? But it's true. We want women who really are like about supporting other women, no matter what their journey as a sportswoman looks like.
So I think we're coming up on the end of time. We are so excited to have Annita on board. And Megan, thank you so much for joining and helping co-host. Megan, do you have any last questions?
I'm just super excited about the future of Artemis, and I'm super excited about your leadership, Annita, and I think it's just going to serve such a needed hole, and I think that we are in good hands with you.
Thank you.
Today's podcast was edited by Tanner Saul. For more details about the episode, don't forget to check the show notes.